Good morning and welcome to the city's virtual All Hands with Mayor Danny Avula. The purpose of this virtual All Hands is to create a space for us to hear from the mayor, to learn about his administration's priorities, and just as importantly, for us to share with him our questions and he can answer them. My name is Paul Manning, and I have the pleasure of serving with the Office of Community Wealth Building, but I also have the honor of sitting down with the mayor during this fireside chat. Before we move to his opening remarks, I do want to share a couple of fun facts. So the mayor and I met approximately 2 decades ago around our shared values and passion for uplifting some of Richmond's most impacted residents. Also, if you all didn't know, Mayor Avula is also a pediatrician, so he's highly skilled in addressing abrasions, bruises, and cuts. But did you know the mayor also can cut the rug? Yes, 8 years ago, the mayor not only competed in, he won the city's version of Dancing with the Stars. So in the words of Bruno Mars, let's go.
But it really, this is part of how I want to show up as a leader with you all, to make sure that we are in a posture of listening, that we are creating sure that we're getting your input and to be able to have conversation. And so this is the first of many. We're going to try to do this rhythm twice a year. And then there'll be lots of other opportunities for you all to engage with us, to provide your feedback through different venues. So thank you. Thank you so much for dialing in today. Remember, this is going to be recorded if you want to watch it later. And thank you in these first 3 months of just being so welcoming to me and my team. It has been quite a 3 months. I mean, I think coming into the water emergency, into budget season, into forming our team, there's been a lot going on, and just really grateful to be serving this city with you all. One of the things that I've been really struck by in my time here has been just the incredible number of amazing things that are happening inside City Hall. And you really wouldn't know it if you read the paper every day, right? I think that's one of the realities of working in the city of Richmond, is that we've got to contend with a really challenging media environment and a lot of scrutiny. And so I just want to say I'm so proud of the way that you guys show up every day in that environment, in that context, and that part of what we've got to do is continue to show up and continue to excel and continue to tell those good stories. So know that that's a huge part of my role, to be your cheerleader, your encourager, to be the person who is telling the world about the good work happening inside of City Hall. So I look forward to circulating, hearing more from you, getting out to the work units, and being able to tell those stories even more convincingly. But even in these first 3 months, I've seen that happen in really profound ways. We walked into the water crisis during week 1, and I just saw dozens and dozens of staff from across the organization who worked countless hours, both getting the water treatment plant up and running, but also in the actual response, right? Getting out to communities, helping with the water distribution, helping serve residents in a time of need. It was really incredible. We've had 60 winter storms in the first few months that I've been here. And so I had the chance to actually do a ride along with our amazing DPW team and see the salting and plowing of streets as we try to keep our residents safe. And as we've been in the midst of tax season, I have seen the phenomenal work of our finance department and 311 try to really meet customer needs as they're paying their taxes, making their payments. And then in budget season, the budget staff have just been absolutely incredible in working under a really tight deadline and working really hard to corral all of the inputs from all of the organization and get questions answered from council and from so many others. And so it's been a lot, but I can already see how this work is aligning with the priorities of our administration coming into this office. And so I want to talk a little bit about those priorities. I want to share some of how we've thought about this and how we've organized this into really 7 pillars. So the first of those pillars is a thriving City Hall that gets things done. We're just at a time where people have really low trust in government, and as I mentioned, in our particular media environment, that's a real challenge for us in Richmond. And so we've got to work really hard to tell our stories, but we've also got to really work really hard to continuously get better, right? To get the input from the customers we serve and to continually iterate and improve. Second is thriving neighborhoods. One of the main reasons that I ultimately decided to run for office was the experience of living in the East End of Richmond for almost 21 years and moving there 2 decades ago in search of deep community across racial and socioeconomic barriers. And for much of the last 20 years, my family has experienced that. We've had incredible neighbors, incredible community, residents who have lived there for decades telling us the stories of Churchill in the olden days. And increasingly in recent years, as more attention has been brought on Richmond, as more people have moved here, that's made it hard for some of our long-term lower income residents to stay in their communities. And so the idea of a thriving community is one that welcomes growth and welcomes development, but also protects long-term residents and creates the kind of incredible diversity in community that I think so many of us yearn for. The third is thriving families where every child succeeds. I'm a little biased. I've got 5 kids, so I think about kids a lot. But I do know that all of us have to make investments and create opportunities for the youngest residents of our city to achieve, whether it's going to higher ed, whether it's tracking to a career. We've got to invest in our schools and in early childhood development. To undergird all of this, we need a thriving economy. We need to make sure that we're investing in places and pathways for folks to work themselves out of poverty, to create new opportunities, starting small businesses, or to find meaningful living wage work here in the city and beyond. I'm really proud of the way that this city has done that by making a minimum wage of $20 an hour. That's a great step that we can take, but we've got a lot of work to do outside of these 4 walls. Next is thriving in inclusive communities. Part of what we love and cherish about this city is its diversity. And so making sure that it feels open and welcoming, no matter who you are, where you're from, your immigrant status, or if you're LGBTQ, we want this to be a place where you are celebrated and cherished and loved as a part of our community. The 6th is a thriving and sustainable built environment. We increasingly are in a context where we've got to pay attention to the long-term sustainability of our decisions. We see every few months the ravishing effect of storms on communities, of flooding, and so building with an eye towards sustainability and towards a net zero context is really where we've got to go for the future of our city. And last, we're a city that tells its stories. I moved here to go to medical school 24 years ago. And part of the reason that my wife and I decided to stay was the story of this city. The reality that Richmond, as the former capital of the Confederacy, the birthplace of the domestic slave trade, and to see rising up out of that decades and decades later, these incredible stories of vibrancy and triumph, particularly in the Black community. It captured our imaginations and it really grew our heart for this place. And so ultimately deciding to run for office was a desire to be a part of that story. And so I think it is really important that we continue to lift up those stories, to encourage one another to be reminded of Richmond's history, and also to make sure that we know that history so that we don't repeat it. So with those as the top 7 priorities and a little framework for how we're thinking about coming into this administration, would love to get to your questions.
Okay, well, Team Richmond, we have sent out a call to you all for questions, and you all certainly did not disappoint. A big thank you to everyone who submitted questions, and we're thankful to the mayor for his time in answering them. We saw some themes in the questions, and while we'd love to address all that were submitted, time sadly won't allow for that. Our Office of Strategic Communications team is working on a frequently asked questions document with some of the most common themes, so be on the lookout for that. Now, we're going to transition back over to the mayor, and we're going to sit down for that fireside chat. So, Mayor, it's time for the questions. Well, Mayor, once again, thank you so much.
Yeah, so glad to do it.
It's so interesting. We have mayors all across the nation, and they serve with passion. But for you to, again, make a decision, you could be doing many other things. You could be making a whole lot of more money, but you chose to not just invest in, but chose to live in. Back in the day, sometimes a tough environment. But so your commitment It's heartfelt, and I really appreciate that personally. So again, the questions. We put on your track shoes. We got to run through about 16 or 15 questions here. So we're going to pace ourselves and do a great job. I know you will. The first question is a combination of multiple questions that were submitted, and it's around the federal landscape. We know lots happening there.
Yeah.
And it's really a three-part question. So the first part of that question is the trickle-down effect from the current president's agenda going to affect the city? If so, what parts of the city could be impacted by budget cuts? What could the city look like, especially in terms of for city employees, in terms of barriers or lack of opportunities? And what steps are you taking to prepare for those challenges?
No. Well, there's no doubt that we're going to feel the impacts of it. I mean, we already are feeling the impacts of it. I mean, I think I can't say loudly enough how much the chaos of what's happening in Washington is impacting local communities. I'll just give a couple of quick examples. A few days after the president took office, there was this funding freeze. There was a lot of confusion about what funds should be frozen, what funds shouldn't. Our partners at Capital Area Health Network, which is one of our federally qualified health centers here in town, it's a 90% federally funded health safety net. And they couldn't access dollars that day, right? They were trying to pull down money for their payroll for next week. And about 48 hours, the federal government said, oh, we didn't mean to do that. But, I think in that environment, it's really difficult to make decisions. And so Khan decided that they would contract their operation. They closed 3 locations around the region. And they did it because of the uncertainty that's being created by the chaos of the federal government. And so that's a real practical example of where we're feeling this. But our communities are also feeling this, right? I mean, every day we're hearing stories from immigrants in our communities who are afraid of ICE activity, of detainment, of deportation. And even, we've met with ICE. We have gotten reassurances that for them it's business as usual, that they are, continuing to focus on a list. But those aren't the stories that we're hearing from around the country, and it's really hard to trust anything we're hearing in this day and age. And so we're working every way we can to continue to build the relationship, to build trust between our law enforcement and immigrant communities, to really educate and equip people around their rights, regardless of their citizenship status. And so there's But you're feeling. I mean, my son was a soccer player at Armstrong High School, just graduated, but my friend is still coaching there, and he said he's had multiple kids on the soccer team who just stopped coming to school altogether. They're not playing this season because of fear of what the government might do. So this is real. I mean, it really is impacting our communities. We're feeling that tension in our LGBTQ communities, and so. There's no doubt that what is happening does have a trickle-down effect, and it has a financial impact too, right? We looked at all of the different federal funding streams coming into the city, and this year alone, across our different budgets, it's $290 million, right? Wow. So it's hard to know what's going to happen, how much of that is going to be in jeopardy, what's going to get pulled back. But I'm on a text thread with mayors all over the country who are sharing their stories of where grants are being pulled back or where funding streams are being shut down. Our partners at VDH just took a $150 million hit, which does affect our local community, right? It means our local health department can no longer fund surveillance activities or community health workers. And that really limits their impact to respond to public health emergencies. So as I think about the streams that are coming into the city, I think, the ones that maybe we're most concerned about, there's a lot of federal money that comes into the housing space, so housing and community development, and there's a lot of federal money that supports the work of our Department of Social Services. Now, we haven't heard any announcements. We don't know if those would be the ones that I'd be concerned about. And then outside of here is homeless services. The region gets about $10 million of federal money a year that helps support the homeless safety net and provides a lot of rapid rehousing options for the unhoused. And so, those are the things that are front of mind for us. Our Office of Intergovernmental Affairs Director, Maggie Anderson, has done a lot of really great work conducting a risk assessment across the city and really thinking about the different ways that federal money is coming in. So, the bottom line is that there is a lot of uncertainty right now. And I think because of so many of these actions and, the chaos that's being caused, we do need to be concerned. There are court cases every day. Hopefully those continue to go the right way. But it's a time of uncertainty.
Wow. Sure. No, thank you so much for sharing that information. The next question we have, it's come in anonymously, and it's an interesting one. It's about the observation deck. And we all know that the observation deck, top floor of City Hall, is a jewel for the city. Many residents for years and years, including myself, have benefited from the scenic views, et cetera. But because of the new protocols and the new key card scanners in the elevator, uh, everyday residents aren't able to get there. So the question is, would you be open to allowing the public to perhaps have guided tours or escorted visits, even on a limited capacity?
Yeah, love the question, and I love the observation deck. 24 years ago, I moved to the city to start medical school in 2000, and one of the first weeks of med school, they took all of the new first-year students up to that observation deck, and so there's this experience and memory of standing out, looking over the city that was going to be home for the next 4 years, and so that's seared into my mind. Mm-hmm. It's a place that I've gone often over the years, and a couple times since coming into this office. So absolutely love it, and I think it's a great question. We've started the conversation with DGS about not just access to the observation mm-hmm. decks, but really the way that we think about access to all of City Hall, right? We really do believe that this is a resource to be stewarded for the taxpayers of the city. And then we've got to balance that reality with the context that we live in. There are just a few things that I remember from my lifetime of like where I was when it happened, right? When I was in third grade, the Challenger accident exploded. And then when I was a first year med student, 9/11 happened. But
I was a little bit older than that.
Yeah. But one of the other ones I remember was the workplace shooting in Virginia Beach back in 2019. I was the health director at the time. And so the way that hit and the reality of, just the uncertainty and fear and anxiety of government workers in this context where we have increasing issues with mental wellness. I think that it is a balancing act. So we've got to be really thoughtful about the safety and security of our employees, and we have to be really thoughtful about providing access. So DGS is working on a plan. I expect, as we get through budget season, probably mid-May, we'll start to look at how we can open up some of these spaces in a way that is safe for our folks. But really look forward to that.
No, thank you so much. So speaking about having an eye on things, that was more of an external look, an eye on the scenic views, but also now we look at internally with the City of Richmond with an eye on the CAO in terms of that search. So the question is, when that new person is brought on board as a Chief Administrative Officer, will employees be able to meet that senior leadership?
Sure. Well, I'm happy to give a really positive update. Richmond is on the map like it wasn't a decade ago, right? People all over the country are paying attention to us. We were named Best Town to Visit by CNN last year. We've received all kinds of accolades. And so, one of my commitments coming into this role was to do a national search for CAO. And we have had, as of 2 weeks ago, we had 215 applicants for the job. People all over the country, city and county managers from different places, folks who were number twos in much larger cities. And so the interest has been tremendous. Obviously, it's taken us some time to sort through all of those applicants. And so we've gotten through a first round of interviews. We're just getting ready to think about the second phase of which finalists we might bring back. I expect to have someone hired hopefully by the end of April, early May. But one of the questions we've been talking about with candidates is how do you actually become visible and present and understand what's happening in agencies? Right. And so a lot of the answers that I've really appreciated are folks who are super committed to getting around and actually visiting work units is a part of the job. They need to feel that presence. They need to feel that connection. And part of, again, the mentality that I bring to leadership in this context is leaders who listen, that we want to be hearing from folks on the front lines. And so I'm really affirmed by the folks that we've talked to. I think whoever we ultimately hire will bring that mentality and will absolutely create the opportunities for people to have direct feedback and engagement.
That's wonderful. You think it's going to be as soon as possibly May?
I think that's when we will have made our hire by. Now, most of the folks we're looking at are, sitting in a role somewhere else, which is good, but it does mean that they can't quit and show up tomorrow.
Sure.
So I expect there'll probably be at least a month of turnaround after that.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So the next question, because you have vast experience heading a local health district, commissioner of a state agency, et cetera. So the next question weaves together your past experiences and with regard to you forecasting for the city. And this question comes from Brian Bills, who's my colleague in the Office of Community Wealth Building. And his question is this. He said, you've led several different governmental agencies. What's one area where the city of Richmond's culture and ways of working have impressed you? And if you're comfortable sharing, what's one request you have for each of us to help change a workplace norm or part of the current culture so we can better serve the people of Richmond?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would not say that this was a surprise necessarily coming in because as public health director, we were kind of integrated in sister agencies to the city. And so I've worked with a lot of these colleagues for many, many years. But I do think coming in and having more connection and interaction with folks on the front lines in City Hall, I've been absolutely blown away by the passion, the commitment to service, and the desire. Like, everybody wants to be here for the right reasons, right? Like, they really want to make a difference in their community, and they want to serve the people of the city. And so that's, like, really beautiful and inspiring to see. I think we need to just keep tapping into that, because, like, that core of service and thinking about who is that resident who we need to solve a problem for, like, that's the work I want us to continue to do. And to that end, the second part of that question of what would I really urge us to do more of, we've got to figure out how to push that problem solving and decision making, as far to the front line as possible, right? Because I think that when a customer comes to us and the person can't solve their problem or has to hand them to someone else, or they get batted around to multiple organizations, that's a really frustrating experience for the customer. And so I think the more that we can, on the front lines, take ownership for that, really try to do some of the problem solving around that, and really always keep that customer at the center of what we're doing. That's how we build the kind of culture and the kind of trust that we're looking for in our community.
So do you see that more of a training, additional training?
I think to some degree it's training, but also it is that, historically our organization has been very hierarchical. And I think dating back to the first strong mayor here, there's been a culture of, like, if you do something wrong, you're going to get your head cut off. And so I think there's culture building we need to do at the leadership levels to say, trying and failing should not be a reason to lose your job, right? That you've got to try and correct, but, like, we've got to iterate and get better along the way, and we've got to have grace for that as an organization. And so, that's not something that changes immediately, but I do think, like, focusing on building that culture of affirming people who are trying to do the right thing, and then training them on maybe where they misstep is part of this, for sure.
Excellent. Well, so thank you so much as we transition. Thanks for acknowledging city employees, their dedication, their impact, and your vision for helping us go from good to great. Oftentimes leaders, because the pressure's there, so you're focused on that vision, top-down leadership, but as I hear you speak, you're talking about that bottom-up leadership, that servant leadership, empowering people to make decisions, like you said, and not being afraid to fail. Transitioning, we are obviously in the middle of budget season, and congratulations once again on recently submitting to City Council a balanced budget. So great job, boom. So we had a few questions around the budget and the process and questions. So here's a question. Our departmental budgets seem to get smaller every year. How can our service departments continue to provide top-notch service to residents when our annual turnaround times are lengthening given budget constraints? Also, there's a line item in the budget that gives the mayor, you, a pay increase. Why do you think it's right for you to receive a pay increase and not your employees?
Yeah. Appreciate the question. I will say, let's start with the budget question. The focus of this budget was really investing in people, right? Coming into this role, the two, I shared my 7 priorities earlier, but the 2 that were, like, front of mind and what I most heard from this community going through the campaign process was an investment in City Hall and improving service delivery and addressing the affordable housing crisis. And so, the way that we improve service delivery and the way that we invest in City Hall is by investing in people. And so I think this budget has done that. We've increased employee pay, we've expanded benefits, we're addressing working conditions because, we talk a lot about being an employer of choice, but that's not just a line we want to say. We actually have to put the money in those investments and make sure that people are choosing to be here as opposed to other places.
And do you think that transition from Richmond retirement system to VRS has been
100%? Yeah, I think it has. We almost immediately we saw the impact of going from the Richmond retirement to Virginia retirement system. It's just changed who is applying for jobs and like the level of experience, because before people would not leave their retirement at the state or in another locality to come here, and now they will because they can continue adding years to VRS, and so it just really has improved the pool of candidates that we have access to, and has helped with retention as well. And so I think that's one example of investing in retirement, investing in healthcare benefits, adjustments to starting pay, creating career ladders. I think we've done a lot of that work to really invest in our people. And so I think the question was, how is it, with shrinking budgets? And I just want to be clear, our budgets are not shrinking, right? We saw an increase in about $55 million of revenue added to our general fund budget this year. And 38 million of that has gone into salary increases, healthcare, and retirement benefits for the entire organization. So, while it may feel like we maybe have less money for, to buy tchotchkes or to do other things, we actually are investing in the most important part of this, which is the people, right? So I hope people come away, and if this budget gets adopted, that people come away. This particular budget has a 3.25% increase for all employees and a 10% increase for sworn officers, because we know this job is way harder in the city than it is in some of the other areas, and so we want to make sure that our average pay is above the region's average.
Excellent.
On the question of the mayor's salary, I really appreciate asking and appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. There was an independent study done last year by the city's Charter Review Commission that really looked at how should we change salaries of elected officials, really tried to align it to salaries of mayors of peer cities, and thinking about the scope of responsibility of this job. And remember that the mayor's salary has basically been untouched since 2004. And then in 2024, and it was untouched because state code would not allow it. But in 2024, there was new legislation that actually changed the ability to look at the salaries of elected officials. And so this proposed budget really looks to do some right sizing. We did that both for city council and for the mayor's salary. We try to benchmark it again against peer cities, but also wanted to be kind of reasonable and thoughtful in what that looked like. And so we set it below the median of the deputy director salaries. And so if you look at what deputy directors are making, the mayor is just below the 50th percentile for that. And remember, I don't have the ability to approve my own salary. This is a proposed budget. Ultimately, it goes to city council. That's the check and balance. They get to decide whether they want to do that or not. So all that said, I recognize that any conversation about leadership and pay has to be done in a bigger context, and that's why, again, this is not just the mayor's salary. It's not just the elected official salary. This budget is really about investing in the people who do the work of this city. And so I'm really proud of that. I'm proud of making sure that we are investing in the people who are working on the front lines, and know that I'm committed to having that ongoing conversation about how we can make your work more effective.
Awesome. Thank you for not shying away from hard questions and the clarity you bring, because oftentimes people have a perception, but it might not be based in reality. Sure. So thank you. Yeah. So now let's shift the focus to employee wellness. This question was also submitted anonymously. And the question goes like this: what strategies will your administration implement to improve overall employee wellness and mental health resources as it relates to 911 dispatchers as well as other employees?
Yeah, I'll draw a little on my experience as former public health director and also commissioner of social services at the state level, because I think a lot of what our frontline employees were experiencing was true trauma. We call it vicarious trauma. It's what happens when you are hearing these stories of people's trauma, or going into homes, or having to make decisions about pulling a child out of a family, right? Like that, you carry that with you. And the same is true so much for our 911 workers, folks who are on call when real crises are happening, and that lives with you. And so I'll point to the Department of Emergency Communications has done a couple of really important things here. They have created a critical stress incident management team that really provides on-the-ground, in-person supports, and so there are members of that DEC team who can provide those supports in real time. They've also launched a Headspace app, which is just kind of a mental health reminder, and I think a lot of people have turned to apps and other things that allow them to center themselves or breathe, or which to some people may sound like nothing, but I do actually think it speaks to a culture of wellness and a culture of thinking about our mental health and well-being in the context of a really stressful job. And then they've also actually tried to send a couple of employees a year to statewide seminars for post-critical incident management, where people are debriefing, they're getting group training, they're even doing EMDR, a therapeutic intervention in some cases. So I think they've taken really good steps, and there's always more we can do, and we'll look for more opportunities to support employees in that way. Beyond DEC, we've also just made huge investments in resources for people. So our employee assistance program is part of the benefits package. People have access to that at no cost. They can do 6 in-person visits, unlimited telephonic visits, grief counseling, depression, anxiety, whatever the issue is, it's available 24/7, 365. And so I really encourage people to call EAP, and then we will use that when things happen in our own organization. In my last job, we had, sadly, one of our employees take their life. And so we brought EAP in to provide group counseling sessions and to really be an on-the-ground presence for the few weeks after that horrific incident. And so know that that's another opportunity for employees. And then lastly, the City Benefit Program now has Marathon Health as this incredible benefit that provides behavioral health services. And so I'm glad we're talking about this, because I think there aren't enough people who recognize the weight of these jobs, and that it's okay to go to see a counselor, see a therapist, and actually just find a safe space to talk through and process and to treat it with medication if needed. And so I'm really glad that we have invested so significantly in behavioral health resources for our staff.
Wonderful, wonderful, thank you. So to all of our first responders, we just thank you so much for all of your work. So while this next question is not directly related to employee wellness, it does speak to employee safety, and it was also submitted anonymously. So as someone who works downtown, I often walk between a assigned parking garage and the building at all times of all day and night. Would the city consider implementing additional safety measures such as a shuttle service or a security hotline for assistance in case of emergencies?
Yeah, so we've actually, I learned recently, we've actually done some of this, and we probably need to do a better job of communicating it out. But, you can, if you're in City Hall, you can call the command center at 646-6503, and you'll get a police escort to wherever your car is parked, and or if you're out at one of the parking lots, a police will escort you to that location. So that's an option that's available right now. Again, command center, 646-6503. And we're always open to feedback on how to make the experience of working downtown, again, feel really safe and secure for our employees. It's really important to us.
Wonderful. So we are halfway through the mark. Your running shoes are smoking a little bit. I don't know if we need a 7th inning stretch. I think our community out there, you're doing well. You're doing great. I think we can continue. All right, not breathing too hard. This next topic was actually submitted by Kim McNeil. She's one of our 311 on the 311 team. And so I'm going to set this first up with the background, okay? So the background is this. She says, you've been an A+ mayor. Oh, so she thanks you for that, and we thank you for that. But she says, as 311 representatives, we're frontline employees, and our citizens are directed to contact us for a wide range of needs. Sadly, sometimes it seems like we are the last to know information that directly impacts those same people we aim to serve, or we're unable to provide timely updates on customer inquiries. So here's the question. How can your administration help improve this disconnect?
Yeah, I'm so glad she brought this up because, both I've talked a lot and really focused on customer service as a huge priority. And we need to recognize that 311 is, for so many people, the first place that customers are going to go when they hear about something that's going on in the city. And so I'll say this with sort of the backdrop of we've just got to be committed to being a learning, continuously improving organization. And I've seen that happen even in the 3 short months that I've been here. We had the water crisis. We launched this water assistance fund. And I think that there were some attempts at communication made, but not enough. And so I think a lot of our 311 folks felt under-equipped to answer questions. And frankly, so much was changing in real time that it was hard to do that. So, I'd give us probably a C at like rolling out that to our 311 folks so that we could get the right information to the public. But we learned from it, right? And so now it is part of our standard operating procedure where the Office of Strategic Communications make sure that Pete Briel, the director of 311, is included on draft media advisories. Great. So before things actually go out to the media, Pete has an opportunity to look at them and to start thinking about, okay, what do we need to equip our 311 callers with? So I think there's an example of how we're iterating, growing, learning as an organization, and it's getting better. And so I think I'll point to standard operating procedures like that, and I'm sure we'll develop others along the way. But always, I want, especially for our 311 folks, let us know when we're missing the ball because it is so important that they are equipped with the information they need because they are the front face of the city.
No, phenomenal. Great. Pete's a great guy. So the following question summarizes a few that came together. Again, there were common themes, so we kind of grouped these together. And it focuses on the organizational culture, going back to that. And this it's a statement/question. It says there are departments within the city in which it appears that managers and senior staff receive different treatments and different ways of being addressed regarding policies and HR procedures, the famous buddy system. What steps can your administration take to ensure that all city staff are held to the same standards and receive fair and equal treatment?
Yeah, really important question, and I think is something that a lot of large organizations struggle with. And so, I would just acknowledge that is a reality in a big system. And so this is where the importance of training, especially those mid-level supervisors and managers, making sure that they are clear on HR policy, that they know how to enact that policy, and that they know how to hold staff accountable, and that they are held accountable to that policy. And so that's the first area of work for us as we improve for an organization, is really improving access to training for those mid-level supervisors and managers. And I would ask that people have some patience with that because it's not like you do a training and then all of a sudden it's fixed, right?
Exactly.
We are a continuously improving organization. And so that's something that we need to keep. And we'll see that over months and over years, we'll start to see the culture change. But part of what it requires is the feedback loop, right? And so folks who are continuing to experience that, I would really urge you to make sure that somebody gets that feedback, whether it goes to HR and employee relations, or comes to our office. I really want to make sure, we're going to create different pathways for people to provide that kind of feedback. But know that, this is deep organizational work that needs to happen, and really focusing on supervisory training and management is the first part of that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for your commitment to do that. So that previous question tees up this next one, which was submitted also anonymously. It says your budget includes a new role for the Chief Transformation Officer. Can you tell us more about that role and how it will affect city employees' work?
Yeah, I think the transformation office is something that we've seen happen a lot in the private sector, and I've got to work with when I was at the state level. Because one of the realities of all of us who are especially, in human services, which is where I come from, but really across local government, is that we don't have the capacity to even do the thing that we need to do, right? Everybody is stretched so thin, the demands are so significant, and so being tasked to take a look at your process and improve it and think about the customer. Like that's a tall order in today's context. And so, when an organization or a leadership team doesn't have the bandwidth to kind of step outside of its day-to-day work and really think about how we're going to transform, you need somebody else to come alongside you to do that. And so that's really the goal, is to bring additional capacity, an outside set of eyes, to focus on the end user, to focus on that customer, and then to provide some expertise in process improvement and customer experience, to make recommendations on where we might invest in new technology. We're in a world where like people they have a supercomputer in their pocket. They go to a website, they order the thing they want, and a friggin' drone comes and drops it off at your front door within hours, right? And that has happened because literally, in the case of Amazon, like billions of dollars of investment to actually create that customer experience. That's not something government has the luxury of doing, but we do need to do it better. And so investing some time and some resource to think about customer experience, process improvement, that's really the goal and the heart of the Transformation Office.
Wonderful. As you spoke, I thought about a book I read years ago. It's entitled Tyranny of the Urgent, and how the urgent things keep coming up. We know this is important, but it's always a crisis, or it's always something here. So
I'm sure a lot of our folks relate to that.
That's right. That's right. Human services, first responders, you name it. So thank you. So as we transition to the next question, it's about capital improvement. It's about infrastructure, beautification, et cetera. So this question comes to us anonymously, and it says, can you talk about the plans for Southside? Sometimes it feels like all the city's focus is only on specific neighborhoods.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot, and I think it comes from a justified place, right? I think for decades we have not had the same level of investment in Southside as we have in other parts of the city. I think recent years we've seen a change, right? I think Mayor Stoney and the team really saw the need for more investment. And you just look, we just cut a ribbon on this amazing Southside Community Center just a couple weeks ago. We've got another one coming up at TB Smith. We just purchased almost 100 acres of the old Altria site down in the 8th District, and we'll start the planning of how do we actually make that site come alive. So there's some really exciting things happening in Southside. Maybe one other thing I'd add to that, recently, one of the first things we did coming into office was really try to get on the same page with City Council. And so we held an administration and City Council retreat, and we spent a day together talking about shared priorities. And one of the priorities that came up was investing in Southside. And so we have 3 main corridors: Richmond Highway, Hull Street, Midlothian Turnpike, that are ripe for development. So one of the things we're doing is we're assigning planners to really focus on Southside corridor development over the next year, and to start to give us a blueprint about how we really bring those corridors to life, make sure that they're aligned with our transit-oriented development principles, making them more bikeable, walkable, accessible to mass transit. And while we do that, we're also going to have to think about what are the unintended consequences of development. Because frankly, over the next decade, there's not a lot of land left to develop in the city, and I think people are going to go and look to Southside because that's where land is available. And so I think we will see tons of growth, and the work that we've got to do is actually thinking about how do we protect the vibrancy and diversity and the presence of long-term residents in those communities as we grow and develop as a city.
Wonderful. No, thank you. So you started off your administration with a major city crisis. Sometimes people refer to it as a baptism by fire. This was a baptism by water, and the ripple effects are still ongoing. This next question was submitted also anonymously. Would you give an update on the water recovery funds and what's going on at the water treatment plant?
Yeah, sure. So coming out of the crisis, it was all about just making sure that we could get through the next days and weeks and multiple winter storms since then. And so we immediately called for a third-party investigation to come in and figure out what happened, what we need to fix it, and what do we do moving forward. And we did that jointly with council, right? President Newbill, Vice President Jordan participated in the actual interviewing and choosing of the third-party entity to do that. We went through a lot of coordination with City Council to make sure that we were in lockstep with them on really understanding what happened. We brought in Dr. Scott Morris as the new director of DPU, who has just done a phenomenal work in these first couple of months on the job, focusing on staff training, on redesigning standard operating procedures, and then making the investments to make sure that in the near term that water production is solid. And so we've done that. We've invested almost $5 million at this point into new pumps, filter systems, backup batteries, et cetera. And so we feel really good about where we're at. That said, we know that we're also a 100-year-old plant.
Right.
And so we've got to make more longer-term, larger-scale investments. And so one of the things that Scott has done in his role is really look at the investments that were laid out in the next 5 years in our capital improvement budget, and then accelerated some of those so that we can really make sure that the water distribution system is front and center and really we can do the work to make sure that it can last another 100 years. On the crisis fund side, because we know that there were a lot of people who were impacted by the outage, whether that was individuals who couldn't go to their jobs because businesses were closed, or small businesses themselves that lost a lot of revenue. And so we did two things. We worked with one of our providers out in the community, Humankind, to operate the Family Crisis Fund. And so we have served upwards of 500 families at this point, paying direct bills to try to keep them in their house, or paying off utility bills or other things like that. And then we set up a separate crisis fund for small businesses that they could apply to, that's being run by our partners at the Metropolitan Business League. So,
and have many businesses taken advantage of that?
We've seen, I don't know the status of what's been paid out, but we've definitely seen a number of applicants, so they're still going through their process. But yeah, I think it's never going to be enough. We're a big city, but I do think just the commitment and really having those partners come along and help with that has been a huge help to a lot of people.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mayor. So we've talked a lot about city employees and their time at work. This next question, which was also asked anonymously, delves into families. And so the statement from the employee says, as a parent, I think it's great that we have a mayor with school-age children. Can you talk about how you're supporting Richmond's kids?
Yeah, well, I've got 5 of my own I got to support, so I'll start there. Our kids are great, and one of them actually just moved out. We're super proud of her, but yeah, we think a lot about...
I'm sorry, she's at what school again?
Well, she just graduated from UVA,
okay.
And now she's working here in town, and I've got a freshman tech, so, we're a house divided, but it's all good. And my wife has worked in Richmond Public Schools for the better part of 20 years, and so we think a lot about schools. We think a lot about how we're investing in and supporting kids. We see it both as the moral imperative that we have as a city to invest in young people, to make sure that they have opportunities to grow, to learn, to track towards either higher ed or to career. And we see RPS as tremendous partners in that work. It's why the budget that we propose has almost a $10 million increase from last year's investment. And so, if the budget gets approved, that's an almost $250 million investment in schools, the highest amount that we've ever invested in schools. Wow. And so, it's really important to me that we are driving the school system forward through those investments. But as a pediatrician, for me, child development starts even in utero. And so we have to use other tools like the Health Equity Trust Fund, which is funding doula services for low-income women. It is funding, in the most recent round of grants, is actually funding home visiting, because I think it's so important for families, particularly lower-educated families, to have the kind of supports of folks who will come to their home, who will assess sleeping conditions, who will help equip early parenting. Because even simple things like reading to your kid every day has so much to do with that neural networking, that neural development.
Exactly.
And so, we start there in utero, after birth, and then we also really focus on those early childhood years. And so our Early Childhood Care and Education Trust Fund actually supports high-quality child care for families that are under 200% of the federal poverty limit. And then we've really invested in out-of-school time, too. And so we have an infrastructure that's run by Next Up at all middle schools and high schools across Richmond. They bring in a number of partner organizations that are providing different enrichment activities for youth in middle school and high school. And I should give a huge shout-out to Parks and Rec here, too. They are in every elementary school after school and have just done amazing work. I think about the arc that they've been on over the last 10 years and just the quality of service, the care. It's touched my family. So my oldest is adopted, but she's the oldest of 10 biological kids.
Oh, wow.
And so for about 3 years, we have been driving her youngest siblings to school, and they go to after school care by Parks and Rec. And Coach there has just been such a formative presence in their lives for 3 young boys to see a black man that is investing and pouring into them like that. It's really powerful stuff.
Wow.
And so I can't say enough good things about what our Parks and Rec team is doing in the after school space. So, yeah.
So you're going to have me thinking, so you just used the words moral imperative.
Yeah.
And that could be a summit in and of itself, because they are our greatest resource in how we ensure that they have a great future, for us to have a great future. So
Absolutely.
it's so key.
Yeah.
So we're down to 2 more questions, okay?
Okay.
And this topic, it's getting both national and local media news, which is creating a lot of uncertainty. And not just for staff, but also for friends and family as well. And it's a topic of DEI. And again, we're going to segue into this question here. So given the growing scrutiny of DEI initiatives, how do you plan to respond if Richmond is pressured to eliminate or alter its equity-focused programs and policies to comply with federal directives? Will your administration take steps to protect our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah. Well, I gotta first say, I don't even understand what's happening up there, right? I mean, I just think that so much of the language and, I think about critical race theory a few years ago, how it came out, and there was this series of interviews where people couldn't describe it at all and just knew they hated it, right?
Right.
And so to me, this assault on DEI feels like the same kind of culture war stuff. I think if you broke it down for people, diversity is celebrating people coming from different backgrounds. Equity is work, through the public health lens that I've done for years, and I think so many of us have been really committed to, of ensuring that people who have less opportunity actually have the investments to be able to have more opportunity, right? And inclusion is this sense of belonging, making sure everyone feels like they are part of a community.
That's
right?
right.
Like, who's against that stuff? And so
Exactly.
I think that I don't want to get caught up in the madness and the rhetoric. One of the things that I've been so struck by and proud of coming into this environment, working with folks in the city, is that this is just part of what we do every day. It's part of our DNA. It's part of what brings us to this work. And so, there may be times where we've got to play the games, and maybe this actually happened on a grant request where we had to take certain elements out of a grant.
Sure.
Now, listen, we will do that because we don't want to jeopardize funding to do the work, but I don't want anybody for a second to think that we're going to take our eye off the ball, because that work of driving community, of driving diversity, equity, and inclusion, it is so much a part of who we are as a city and who we are as a city government, and I want people to be reassured by that.
So you're saying if they say don't say tomato, we say
tomato.
Okay, gotcha. This is the final question, and shoes are still looking good. Okay, so Mayor Avula, as we take a look at the past hour, we talked about the topics range from city employees, the day-to-day operations, the budget, their experiences, impacts of navigating federal changes. This final question is a good one, and it points us to what's next. And it's also been asked anonymously. I heard mention of an employee questionnaire or survey that is going to be sent around. What is the goal of the survey, and can we answer anonymously, and how candid can we be?
Yes, you can absolutely answer anonymously, and please be incredibly candid. I've mentioned multiple times during this conversation my commitment to making sure that we are an organization that is continuously improving. We can't do that without feedback, right? And so it is really crucially important that people are, providing honest feedback in these surveys. One of the ways we will preserve your anonymity is that this is done by a third party. We've contracted an outside agency, SIR, to administer the survey. So any data we get will not be linked to individuals. And then we will certainly, have the conversation with our leadership about what employees might be feeling and how do we create the environment where they can can be absolutely candid in their feedback to make sure that we are not retaliating. If anybody feels any hint of that, please make sure employee relations knows. But we want to do everything we can to make sure that you feel comfortable in providing really candid feedback, and that we will use that candid feedback to drive our improvement as an organization.
Wonderful. Mayor Danny Avula, thank you so much for the time of candor, for the time of transparency, and genuine leadership. So we thank you. And we thank all of you all for a big thank you to all of you all for participating in today's event. Thank you for submitting your questions. And for those who came in late, this will be recorded and sent to you at a later time today. So again, thank you for joining this first ever virtual all hands. We're going to have more to come, and make it a great day. Keep pursuing excellence.
Thanks, everybody.